Friends, I'm really thankful to the Forum for Investing in Young Children Globally and the Ambedkar University Delhi for giving us an opportunity to share with you all some of our views and opinions about this issue, which is very important. Now, most of us here are well versed with the some of the important aspects of young children in India, but still, since we would be commenting on the adequacy of budgets, which is a very complex issue, I felt I could take a few minutes initially to reiterate some of these major facts and concerns. Now, we know that there are a number of states in this country whose 0 to 6 child populations are larger than the populations of a number of other countries. So, I mean, India has 158 million young children, that is almost 13% of the country's population. And we are talking about policy priorities and budgetary priorities for this very important section of the country's population. And also, yesterday we have discussed the relevance of timing of these investments. I mean, we all know that the policy framework and the interventions need to be designed for all the four stages involved in early childhood development, from conception to birth, birth to 6 months, then 6 months to 3 years, which was pointed out by Mr. Amarjit Sinha very clearly yesterday, that this is something which has not been covered adequately, and then 3 years to 6 years. And this is not visible, it's a chart which is there in the paper, which is uploaded on the Dropbox, but we are highlighting here the kind of interventions which would be required in all these four stages, covering care and protection, health, nutrition and preschool education for the young children. Now, very briefly, I would like to reiterate that the situation with regard to maternal health in India is a cause for concern, and the situation with regard to some of the development indicators for young children are pretty alarming. The infant mortality rate is still high, and India is missing the MDG target. The under 5 mortality rate is also high, and more importantly, there is a lot of diversity across states. We find that some of the states have been able to achieve reductions in infant mortality rate and under 5 mortality rate, but there are other states which are still struggling to do so. The declining child sex ratio over the last few decades has been another cause for concern, and there are very few states in this country. In the northern India, it's only Himachal Pradesh which has a child sex ratio of above 900, and that's a cause for serious concern. There are also other development deficits of young children, like the high proportion of underweight children, stunted and wasted children, and so on. So clearly the country has not done enough to take care of its young children, to invest in them. And when we look at the policy framework, there are a few substantive programs and schemes, but as was pointed out yesterday, there are also some major gaps in the policy framework in this country when we are looking at interventions for young children. In terms of the lack of convergence between different ministries, which was pointed out yesterday, we know that the ministries of Women and Child Development, Human Resource Development, and Health and Family Welfare at the national level and their counterparts at the state government level, they are all dealing with important programs and schemes which have an important bearing on young children, yet there is lack of convergence between their interventions. The government interventions being carried out through the schemes are also considered to be pretty limited, and in the policy framework, the interconnectedness of women's needs and rights with those of young children has not been addressed very well. For instance, I would like to share a specific example of a housing scheme in urban slums, say the Rajiv Awas Yojana, and there is another scheme called the Basic Services for Urban Poor. There are very few urban poor related schemes in this country. Now, in these schemes, the focus is entirely on provisioning of dwelling units or housing units. Now, we have seen that there is this guideline, policy guideline, that the housing units provided in the slums should be registered preferably in the names of eligible women. But when we look at the implementation of these schemes, we find that that important guideline is not being implemented well. And we have seen that when the house is registered in the name of the woman, that does have a positive impact on the children. I mean, given the deep-rooted patriarchy in our society, women are being expected to take care of the children, the young children, and in such a case, it's all the more important to ensure that the entitlements for women are expanded and those are also enforced properly. The neglect of preschool children is something which has also been highlighted yesterday, and there are also a number of social factors which have not been incorporated in the design of policies and programs yet. But then when we are thinking of budgets, we are looking at public investments or public funding, and in the Indian context largely for public provisioning of services. But before getting into the specific facts and figures for the magnitude and composition of public spending in programs for young children and mothers, I would like to draw your attention to the larger problem in the country, which is that the country has a limited fiscal policy space, or the policy space available to the government for expenditure as compared to the size of the country's economy. That is small, that is limited as compared to other countries. Here in this chart, we are looking at both the tax GDP ratios and the total government spending as percentage of GDP. Now we know that the GDP is something which captures the spending by the government, the households and the companies. So when the government has a larger policy space, it allows the government to spend more on public provisioning of various kinds of services and various other development interventions. So how does the fiscal policy space in India compare with those in other countries? In Brazil, it's much larger, and in the OECD countries, on an average, that's even higher. Over the last 2 decades, total government spending, total budgetary spending by the government in this country has been stagnant at around 27% of GDP. And that we find for 2010 in Brazil was close to 40% of GDP. In the OECD countries, on an average, it was 46% of GDP. How have the other BRICS countries dealt with their fiscal policy trajectories over the last decade? Now, from this compilation based on IMF data, we find that China, South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, and even Russia, all these other BRICS countries have stepped up the total government spending to GDP ratio over the last decade. And Indian policymakers have been most responsive to comparisons with China. So they should take note of the fact that in China, the total government spending has gone up from 18% of GDP to 25% of GDP over the last decade. And in India, as I said, for the last 2 decades, it has been stagnant at around same 26% of GDP or 27% of GDP. So what does it translate to in terms of public spending on various programs and schemes? We'll come to the programs and schemes which are more relevant for young children. But in general, when we look at some more comparisons for general government expenditures per capita in US dollars at current prices, incorporating the purchasing power parity, we find that the per capita expenditure figures, government spending figures in India, are much lower than those in other countries, not just the OECD countries, but also some of the other BRICS countries. And we need to take note of the difference between China and India, which seems to have jumped in the last decade. In case of China, it was 469, and India 422 in 2001. And in 2011, in China, it has become 2004. In India, it is 997. Now, we have looked at some recent evidence on health spending in China being stepped up significantly over the last 10 years or so. So clearly, India also needs to take note of the fact that the other, not just the developed countries, which have been following such policies for a long time now, the other BRICS countries are catching up in terms of stepping up their social spending. Now, One of the reasons for the stagnation in the overall government spending to GDP ratio in case of India is the approach that has been taken towards fiscal consolidation. Issue of debt sustainability is something which is very contentious, very debatable, but even if we accept that the government in our country does need to reduce the deficits, the borrowing in its budgets, how should the government approach it? Should the government not think of expanding the tax GDP ratio? In case of India, the tax GDP ratio is a low 17%. Last year, the Union Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram was the Finance Minister at the in the Union government last year. He admitted in the budget speech that the tax GDP ratio for the country is low for a large developing country, and it's not going to garner enough resources for development. This admission came for the first time in almost 12 years. And a similar concern has been reiterated by the present Finance Minister in this year's budget speech also. Now clearly our policymakers are slowly waking up to the reality that India needs to collect more taxes, because otherwise their fiscal consolidation efforts are all leading to compression of public expenditure. And those of us who spend more time on analyzing public expenditure budgets, we know that social sectors become a soft target. When the government has to check increase in expenditures, social sectors or development programs become a soft target because it's very difficult to reduce other committed expenditures. For instance, interest payments, pensions and all that. Defense is also considered to be very sensitive, and social sectors are something where a lot depends on the political priorities of the government. Since they become the soft target, in an era of fiscal consolidation without any increase in tax revenue collection, the consequence is that government spending on social sectors is not increased as much as it should be, even when the government does recognize the need for higher spending on social services. Over the last 10 years in India, there has been some reprioritization within this overall 27% of GDP, which is government spending. Social sector spending, here by social sector, I am referring to sectors where there is a very direct link with human development, like education, health, nutrition, also drinking water, sanitation, housing, and other such areas. But this compilation of social sectors is based on the way the figures are presented in the budget documents in India, so it does not include a few important areas like food security and all. But looking at these social sectors, we find that there has been some reprioritization in government budgets over the last 10 years. Overall government spending on social sectors has gone up from close to 5% of GDP to now about 7% of GDP. But that is clearly at a much lower level than the magnitudes of social sector spending as percentage of GDP in other countries. But the reason we are highlighting this point is that when we look at the specific programs and schemes for young children in this country, the larger resource envelope for these schemes is this overall resources allocated towards social sectors. If the priorities for social sectors are stepped up, then the resources provided towards programs for young children will also go up. And most kinds of programs meant for young children like ICDS, creche scheme and so on, they all fall under these social sectors. So that's why the larger resource envelope within which targeted investments are being made by the government on young children, that is something which has been small in the Indian context. And the problems which are well known in the context of sectors like education, health, drinking water and sanitation in the Indian context, limited coverage of public services and also unsatisfactory quality. The programs for young children also suffer from all these problems. Now we know that this is well known to most of us here, that public spending on health as percentage of GDP, India's public spending is one of the 6 or 7 lowest in the world. And public spending on education also, there have been political commitments by all kinds of political parties that the public spending on education and health need to be stepped up, but that doesn't really translate into the budgets when the parties come to power. And we feel the main reason for this is the unwillingness as well as the inability of the government to tackle the problem in the domain of taxes. Brazil and China, they both have also collected more revenue from their public sector enterprises, but they have also looked at, particularly Brazil has also looked at taxes. And in India, there is a need for more progressivity in the taxation system. Without getting into the details of that, I would just like to say that the main reason for inadequacy of budgetary resources for social sectors lies in the unwillingness and inability of the government to tackle the tax issues. Now, when we look at the specific programs for young children, I mean, it's very difficult to segregate what exactly is the investment in young children, and then how much is an investment which includes young children as well as mothers or older children. So the compilation that we have done in our paper is a very, I would say it's an overestimation of the amount of spending, but the issues would remain the same. In sectors like nutrition, we know about the Integrated Child Development Services, which was mentioned a number of times yesterday as the largest ECD program anywhere in the world. In the midday meal scheme in education sector also, investments are being made for nutrition. There are a number of schemes for care and protection of children, and the young children are also benefiting from those. There are a number of programs in health. In education, we have this program for universalizing elementary education called Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which includes resources for primary education, and it is now supposed to look at preschool education as well. Now, in terms of states, I'll share with you some of the figures we have got for two of the better performing states, Tamil Nadu and Odisha. But in most of the states, we find that overall budgetary spending is dependent significantly on resources coming from the union government's budget, resources coming from the central schemes. But when we look at the sectoral composition, there is obviously a need for stepping up investments in all the sectors, but the meager funds provided for care and protection and to some extent health do catch our attention more. Now, when we look at the union budget, the overall amount, as I said, this is an overestimation of the specific investments in young children, but this does give us an indication of the kind of issues we are looking at. Some 4% of the union budget has been allocated towards this sector, and that's about 0.6% of GDP. Now, it's very difficult to answer questions on adequacy. If somebody would say that how much would be adequate, as was pointed out by Inakshi yesterday, we'll have to look at standards also. What are our quality standards? Even if we define quality standards, the unit costs would differ a lot across different regions in this vast country. But generally, when we look at the quality and coverage of public services and the issues that we are looking at, I mean, obviously, the government needs to do more, the government needs to spend more. And when we look at the investments from the state government's own resources, as I said, in most of the states, they're depending heavily on the resources provided by the union government in the central schemes. But Tamil Nadu, we know, has been doing a lot better in terms of ECD than the other states. Among the poor performing states, Odisha's name has come up a number of times in some of the discussions that we have participated in terms of doing, introducing new programs and schemes for children. Now, in both Tamil Nadu and Odisha, we find that the central share in, I mean, this includes total budgetary expenditure in the state on this, as I said, this overall set of programs and schemes from which young children, slightly older children and mothers, they are all benefiting. And we try to see to what extent are states like Tamil Nadu and Odisha depending on central resources. In these states also it's more than 60% that they are depending on the central resources. Now, as I said, given that the center and the states both are responsible for young children, and many of the aspects of children are covered in the concurrent list and state list in our constitution. So the state governments can have their own legislations and policies. They can also have their own rules and regulations in all these areas. And in the last few years, the fiscal situation of the state governments also has improved. And that is something which kind of encourages us to say that it's not the union government alone, but the states also need to step up resources for programs in young children. Now, the moment we talk about higher investments, we hear about inadequacies, problems in fund utilization. I will come to that next. But before that, do we not have enough evidence to suggest increases in budget allocations? It's not that difficult. Here I have put together in this slide some concerns with ICDS, which have been shared by various observers. And in the next slide, I would share some of the recent policy directions for ICDS. And then we can see, do these points not make it clear that there is a need for allocating more funds for ICDS? Now, the Supreme Audit Institution, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, had pointed out the gaps in infrastructure in ICDS when they had audited, when they did a performance audit of ICDS in 2011-12. Some of these would have been addressed in the last 2 years, but still, these gaps were very glaring. Then, in terms of the number of children being catered to per Anganwadi center, the child care centers, that also is very high. And the staff shortages in Anganwadi workers and Anganwadi helpers has been addressed to a large extent. But in positions of program management, the child development project officers and the supervisors and all, there is still a lot of shortage. When we had done studies on ICDA, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and all, in 2 districts a couple of years ago with UNICEF India, we had covered Rajnandgaon district in Chhattisgarh and Lalitpur district in Uttar Pradesh. The ICDS official said that, look, we know that monitoring and supervision of services in Anganwadi centers is very important, but we don't have finance account staff, we don't have supervisors and all, so the child development project officers are devoting a lot of their time to do things which other people are meant to do. And they said that we really don't get time to do monitoring and supervision. And the shortage of staff in program managerial positions like the CDPO supervisors, this is something which needs to be addressed, and this would require more funds. In terms of policy directions in restructuring ICDS, a number of very welcome measures have been included in the 12th Five-Year Plan document. Some of these would have already been translated on the ground, but a lot of these would still need to be taken up. And in terms of providing an additional Anganwadi worker, expanding the working hours of, opening hours of the ICDS centers, improving services, a number of things. Now, all these reforms in ICDS would certainly require additional funds, additional resources. So, even before we think of the problem of utilization of funds available, we have to see that the unit costs are limited, the unit costs are low, the components are limited, so more interventions or more expenditure heads need to be introduced, and the unit costs for these also should be stepped up. In terms of the funding available for ICDS, these are in rupees crore, but this 15,712 crore would be something like 150 billion rupees. That was the union budget expenditure on ICDS in 2012-13. In the latest budget, 2014-15, this has gone up to 186 or 187 billion rupees. The states also provide some of their own share, as we had seen earlier. Now, we try to look at private sector or non-government spending on young children, but that's extremely difficult. There is a complete dearth of information, but still, one of our team members looked at the records maintained by the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, FCRA division of the Ministry of Home Affairs, which governs the foreign funding which flows into the country. We looked at the figures reported for the year 2012-13. In the year 2012-13, some roughly 100 billion rupees had flown into the country from foreign funds. And out of that 100 billion, when we looked at the 100 most prominent child-related NGOs and INGOs, the foreign funds reported by them together was around 15 billion. So, and this was for children in general. In some cases, it included women and children also. So, taking that as a very rough kind of estimate, when we look at the figures available in the non-government sector, it's only 15 billion at the most, whereas in the major program for young children, it's 186 billion. And so clearly, as all of us know, I'm just trying to share the fact to make it more clear, a major chunk of investments in young children is coming from the government, but that is still inadequate and that needs to be stepped up in terms of the infrastructure gaps, the human resource gaps, and improving the quality of services. But as was discussed yesterday, we cannot talk about increasing budget resources. Let us assume that the Ministry of Finance tackles the issue of tax policy and revenue mobilization, and there is a political will generated. Jan had shared difficult ways as well as promising ways in his presentation in the morning yesterday, different kinds of ways of stepping up resources for young children. Let us suppose that the Ministry of Finance bothers about those. But still, advocates for this sector would be confronted with this question: what about poor utilization of resources? Which was also pointed out in some of the presentations yesterday by Anit Mukherjee also. And that is an important issue. We cannot ignore the issues in underutilization of available resources as well as poor quality of utilization. When I'm saying underutilization, I'm referring to unspent balances at the end of the year. In terms of poor quality of spending, now there is no universally applicable definition for quality of spending, but in our studies that we did with UNICEF India in these two districts, and subsequently some of the partners of CBGA in states have also been looking at some of the social sector schemes, including ICDS and Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. We have found that the expenditure is crowded towards the end of the financial year, so it's skewed in terms of the time. The expenditure is also skewed across regions. Within a district, the percentage of utilization tends to be higher if we are looking at the block which is there in the district headquarter. The farther we go from there, the percentage of utilization also declines. Across different components also, there are some components where it is easier to disburse money, and there are some components where it is more difficult because it would require more programmatic effort. So in terms of these parameters and the perceptions about leakage of funds, for us it has always been very difficult to get evidence of corruption because we cannot get evidence of corruption from government records. That would require social audit, public hearing and so on, which is not within our areas of work. But there is widespread perception of corruption in all the schemes. Now, these are the problems in quality of utilization that we are referring to. As far as corruption is concerned, one of the ways which can help reduce corruption is to enhance budget transparency at the grassroots level. Now that is easier said than done. In terms of budget transparency, locally usable, locally relevant budget information in our country is collected in the government system, but it is not published. Maybe as far as the ECD programs is concerned, we should make a demand that the figures collected by the Comptroller and Auditor General's office for all the ECD programs, they are all documented in the offices of Accountant General in the states, based on which aggregate reports are generated for the entire state, and then an aggregate report is generated for the whole country. To begin with, we should make a call for making all those pieces of information for different blocks public. Those information is also covered under the Right to Information Act, and once the CAG has completed their audit and the reports have been published, we should ask for those disaggregated information on the ECD programs for different blocks across the state. Those should be made public to begin with, but then in the long run, people need to be given locally relevant budget information. People would like to know how much money has been sanctioned for the ICDS centers in their block, who is responsible for disbursing this money, how much has been spent, and so on. So in terms of budget information, one of the problems that we have encountered is we talk to different kinds of NGOs, all these social activists, a number of people, but our figures are always at the national level or at the most at the state level. So common citizens don't really connect with those figures, and they need information which is locally relevant for them. So clearly the budget transparency in that direction needs to be enhanced. But the other issue of underutilization of resources, there are a number of factors, and Anit also shared some of those yesterday in his presentation. But in our analysis, we find that shortage of human resources is the most important factor. As I said, in programs like ICDS and other social sector schemes, there is shortage of staff in all the functions: program management, finance accounts, and service delivery. But when we look at the other problems in terms of the poor quality of need assessment and delay in fund flow, those also are rooted in this problem of staff shortage. The poor quality of need assessment and planning is because of both lack of human resources and lack of training. But once the process of need assessment gets delayed, the process of submission of plans or documents, their approval, and the subsequent flow of funds, the entire cycle gets delayed. And that's why all these things, the bottlenecks in the fund flow process and all, everything needs to be addressed. But the problem of staff shortage is something which is critical. In the Indian context, we have talked a lot over the last few years about transparency, accountability, and participation in governance, but not really about the erosion in state capacity, the erosion in capacity in governance in terms of shortage of staff. Per 100 residents, India has 1.6 government staff, including centers, states, PSUs, and defense. That figure, 1.6, the comparable figure for South Africa and Mexico is higher than 3. For Brazil, it's close to 6. For UK, Canada, it is higher than 10. These are all based on ILO data. So contrary to very widely held perceptions that India had a higher number of staff in the government, in fact, we now realize that India has less people in the government than what is required. The deployment of those people across different functions, across different cadres and all, that's an issue which needs to be addressed. But overall, when we look at these important sectors like ECD, the issue of staff shortage is something which has caused a lot of problems in utilization of resources. So with this, I would like to end the presentation. Thanks for your patience and attention.
Well, that was just terrific, Subrat. Thank you so much. I think he really pointed out the challenges, but the importance of doing this type of vigorous budget analysis if we really want to get underneath the issues. I want to take, we only have a few minutes, but I would like to open it up to both the forum, but to the entire group for questions. Many of the points that he made about India could be applied to countries around the world, including my own, particularly the effect of the lack of infrastructure on budget utilization. So let me take questions from the audience. Okay, I'm going to go to Eduardo.
Thank you, Subrat, for your talk. I'm from Brazil, and I don't know if you have been following, but our spending in education, as you showed, I think it's higher than India, and it's going to grow a lot more to 10% of the GDP. But even the number nowadays, if you see it, our education is terrible. We have most of the children in school, I think it's more than 90%, but with a really bad quality, even with this number that have been spent. And we're going to grow now for 10%. I'm in favor of it, to increase the amount of money spent, but we have a big problem. I was looking in your bio that you follow budget, but my question is, do you have like a clear position, or do you have other organizations that can really give not only ideas but really work for use this budget in a good way, like that really is going to change the reality, because we are not seeing this change the reality of Brazil, and we are really worried about that this increase of 10% to GDP in education. We're going to have a lot more spending without any efficiency. Thank you.
So Prativa or Subrat? Go ahead.
I mean, it's true that increasing budgets is not automatically going to translate into better quality of education. And quality of education is it's a complex issue which would involve a number of factors. And the judicious use of budgets and reducing leakage of funds and all that, that is certainly one of the factors, but also the design of programs and schemes in education. That is something which was pointed out by a number of speakers yesterday. The design of programs and schemes in education, that would also be very important. But you know, when we are looking at Brazil, it's definitely the case that there would be scope for further improvement. But the gap between India and Brazil is so stark. In terms of literacy rates, Brazil has 93% or higher adult literacy rate. In India, it would be how much, Pratibha? 68. 68% is the adult literacy rate in India, and many people, even policymakers, would admit that functional literacy, which is captured in the 68%, also is not really something which is very acceptable. So if we increase our standards of capturing literacy, the most basic indicator of education, perhaps it would be less than 60% also. So the gap between India and Brazil is a lot. Along with stepping up budgets, it is absolutely necessary to reduce or minimize the scope for leakage of funds and also improve the quality of education through the design of programs and schemes. But Pratibha, would you like to share something on this?
Like in case of Brazil, the expenditure is right now is more than 10% of GDP is going for education. And you were saying the situation is terrible, that is for the elementary education sector or overall? Because like in case of India, since they are spending less than, not less than, now it's around 4% of GDP on education. But yeah, there is, we can say right now there is a little bit sufficient, not sufficient, but compared to higher education or secondary education, spending is better in elementary education. But if we look with the level of education, the spending on education is very less from the government. So we are pitching for first increase the expenditure, increase the GDP for education, increase the expenditure. Then we can look at the very micro components where to we have to like the other components we look for, like I mean.
So I think the point here is that even when the budgets are going up, there's still tremendous gaps. And I think what Eduardo has pointed out to us many times in conversation, it's not what the overall literacy rates are, it's how those may differ by income levels and by areas in the country. So there's still a lot more work to do. Larry, you had a question.
The question I have is whether you have a sense of how this type of information can be used to promote the kinds of changes that you're talking about. I think your budget analysis I wish we would have had this in a way at the start of yesterday, because it grounds the conversations in the real political economy of a country. But I'm wondering what you think the vehicles are for the use of this kind of comparative information, because you relied a lot on across-state comparisons to highlight the poorest performing states, and across-national comparisons with the implicit idea that India should be getting closer to comparable nations, and that should be a policy aspiration. What's the real politics of that in India?
So let's hold that question and take one more from the audience, if the lights will let me see it. Go ahead. In the back. Sorry, I can't see the person that just put their hands up. Terrific. Okay.
Ms. Baingana from Makerere University. From the conversations yesterday and again today, my sense is that there's a skewing towards education. I liked very much your summary this morning, Joanne, and the idea that we have to think as a package and think of all the different components together, which is all well and good. But from what I hear and from the presentation this morning from Subrat, it is very clear that health seems to be lagging behind in this whole conversation. At least that's what seems to stand out for me. So even as we talk about moving forward and trying to move forward together, I think we also need to think about how do we ensure that within the sectoral budgets where sectoral prioritization takes place, that these then will be channeled into this ECD portfolio. I think the challenge is maybe in the Ministry of Health, they are not prioritizing these issues. That's what it seems to me. So then how do we turn that around? Because I think it may not happen unless it is done in a
Oh, it's a very important point, particularly as we move the continuum from child survival to child development. So let me turn to Subrat and Prativa for the answer to Larry and to our colleague from Makerere.
And on this question first, this would not be the best inference to make that education is getting more funds, and you know, it's pitching one sector against the other is not really going to be very productive for our advocacy. You're right. I mean, this is the kind of problem which we have faced when, for instance, HUC Center for Child Rights, Inakshi was here yesterday. HUC started doing child budget analysis, and then CBGA also continued the analysis in a similar methodology. We have all faced this problem when people have said that, oh, education is getting a bulk of the resources meant for children, and health and protection are neglected. A better way to articulate it would be that the shortage of resources seems more acute in health and protection, but education and nutrition also are short of funds. So the problem of inadequacy of public resources is there across sectors for children and young children. And yes, you can say that it is more acute in health and maybe protection and care of children. About Larry's question, it's a difficult question in terms of what use can this kind of analysis be put to. I would say that, I mean, I would like to respond to that more from our experience of looking at how policies have changed, how policy priorities have changed. That's a very complex process in a country like India. With good research, we can influence the perspective of the policymakers, but we can't really influence their sense of urgency to act on those. The sense of urgency, even when they are convinced that something is right for the country, it needs to be done. That sense of urgency would depend on a number of factors. One of the possible things could be to identify champions within the policymakers. We have seen that at the level of the state governments, political leaders have emerged as champions for the cause of human development. I think a few years ago, World Bank had done a study on Tamil Nadu and Kerala, and they opined that in Tamil Nadu, whichever political party came to power, the two major political parties which have been kind of holding power at the state government, but both the political parties have accorded a high priority to social policy and social sectors. Likewise, in some of the other states also, in Bihar also, we have seen that in the last few years, the priority for human development has been increased. And clearly, the top political leader in the state must have taken a call that this is something which is required. And there are also champions of human development within the bureaucracy. So I think if we can urge some of the policymakers to take the lead that is something which could begin the kind of reform that we are expecting, and then we can expect other states to follow the examples. But that's a very difficult question, so.
What's great is that you've given people the tools and the information they need to do the advocacy, to build the political will. We have just a few more minutes left in the back right there. I'm sorry, Jan, I can see you now.
Thank you. I am deeply, deeply impressed by the work by Subrat and Protiva, and I think every country should have this work. Why? Joan, in her introduction, spoke of a transition, a feeling of transition. This is one of them. We are going from a period where we said developing countries have no money, to a period where we say many, not all, developing countries actually have the money, but it doesn't translate into ECD services. So we're running into a new bottleneck. But the good news is that this is a manageable bottleneck. If you have no money, what can you do? If there is money, it's in your own hands. Now, translating this money, the economic growth, into child services goes in two steps. Many steps, but two main steps. One is, and I'm simply following Subrat and Protiva. The first is, of course, taxation, improving the tax to GDP ratio, make sure that more of that growth goes to the public budget, the fiscal space, and that's a general problem. It's not ECD specific. And then the next step is to make sure that that public budget actually translates into programs. That's in our own hands. Well, the hands of our own sector. Now, underspending is, of course, the clearest expression of a lack of absorptive capacity. You actually have the money in your hands and you don't get it spent. But it's, of course, much broader than that. In many countries, the people of the Ministry of Finance, of the Treasury, will tell you, we have money, but we don't disperse it, we don't budget it, because we don't get credible plans from the sectors. But I say it again, the good news is, this is in our hands. It's in our own hands. We can actually do something about it. It's not like in the past that we say, yeah, there's no money, what on earth can we do? Now, I finally get to a question. I'm sorry for this introduction, but I mean that serious. More countries should have this analysis, and we should talk about how to disseminate your methodology by Subrat and Protiva to other countries.
I think
the question, you mentioned human resources as the main bottleneck and the question is that a matter of not enough money for training of nurses, teacher training, child rights workers, or is it a matter of not enough pre-qualified people in the regions where the needs are highest? What I mean is that in the most remote areas you will not find enough people who complete 2 or 3 years of secondary education who are qualified to even enter nurse training or teacher training. Which of the two is the most important, money or pre-qualified teachers, people?
Protiva?
As far we have seen that whenever, like in terms of education, I can say whenever we are disaggregating the expenditure, we have seen in the whole, like Sarva Shiksha Abhijan is one of the prominent schemes for elementary education. So whenever we are trying to see what is the component of expenditure, we have seen that more than 67% is going for infrastructure and teacher salary, but only 1 to 2% is allocated for teacher training. Now, training, that sorts of training that is given to the teacher in the field level, we have seen it's maximum 2 days training or something like that. Not very rigorous training process is there, and for that we have enough number of the level of, for the early childhood education, the level of training that is needed for that, we have enough number of sufficient people who have that much qualification to get that training. But firstly, there is the training is the thing that is think of it's not that important. First, it's not given that much priorities in the whole designing of schemes that we can see from the allocation of budget. So I feel that it's the obviously the priority for training, and then lesser allocation for these things are the major reasons for these bottlenecks.
So the human capacity issues at all levels. And I would put my former government hat on just for a second and say that's also in the public sector, in the governance of these programs, the continual need to train and support the people that are implementing these programs is really key. So we could go on and on for this session. We've already run over. I just want to end this with picking up on Jan van Raven's point. I think what we all take out of this session is the importance of this budget work to make sure that we're monitoring public funding, foreign donor funding from outside of the country, and private sector funding. So it's not only doing budget analysis, but it's of public dollars. It's become much more complicated. But the interplay between those, the interplay between monitoring central government budgets while we're trying to maintain state investments, and looking at the smarter utilization of funding and what kind of outcomes we're getting along the way are all critical. Please join me in thanking them and helping make a call out to all the funders to continue and step up this kind of budget work. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over now to Pia, Brito, and Lorraine Scher, who are going to continue our conversation and pick up on several of the points that have been made throughout the session as we develop a more coherent framework for moving the issues forward. Thank you very much again.